Hello everybody, welcome back in our lecture about Petriflow low-code language for object-centric processes and a low-code platform, Netgrif, for processes in this Petriflow language. So in the last lecture, we started with so-called inter-process communication. So we had an example of an insurance where several persons could be insured. So we had one-to-N relationship, and we had two processes. And this insurance process controlled the process of insured persons. So when we created an insured person and added that insured person to that insurance, so we did it from the process insurance. Now we will look at a slightly different example where we will maybe go a little bit more deep into this inter-process communication. So we prepared a couple of slides at the beginning where we will illustrate how this communication actually works and summarize also a little bit theoretically what we explained in that concrete example in the last lecture. And we will also go through another example. So we choose two different processes today, a process of an order and a process of an invoice, and we will then create on the fly relationship between invoices and orders. So let's go into this short presentation. So as I said, what is the advantage of the Petriflow language or object-centric processes as such is that we can actually we integrate actually three different layers: a data layer, an application layer, or a layer with the life cycle or with the workflow of that data, together with presentation layer, which are actually forms associated to the tasks of that life cycle workflow process. And now, if we have this, we can actually communicate on different layers. So because usually if you have, for example, a data model, you are actually creating relationships between data objects only on a data level. Like, okay, this one object might have several different objects of different type as a relationship, as actually children of that parent object, for example. But there is never said in which exact time or in which exact moment in the life cycle of those data objects this relationship is created. It is created already at the beginning when a constructor is called, or do those objects exist independently, and maybe in some moment during the life cycle they create this relationship, and maybe then the relationship disappear later. So those things you never can express if you only have relationships on static data level. So you need to have a kind of relationship on a workflow process level and somehow synchronize events, saying like, okay, if I'm pressing this button in this form of one process, then I'm creating an instance of a different process, for example. Or if I change a data variable of one process, I'm establishing that data relationship. And maybe later on I will actually delete that relationship between those two objects. And the third possibility of relationships is a relationship on presentation layer. Like I can have for an encapsulation, I can have forms in one process and use them as subforms in another process. And if I have one-to-many relationship, so I can use several subforms of one process in one form of another process as a table, for example. So this is everything what is possible to do with a Petriflow object-centric processes. So as I said, we have now the running example, orders and invoices. And as we said, we will establish these three kind of relationships, like on data layer, relationships using references, very similar to foreign keys in SQL databases. Yeah. And now imagine that we have actually this object, this process or object-centric process with this data attributes, this life cycle as a workflow process. And for example, we would have some forms here. And now what we are saying, okay, we can establish and we can have a different process. Also with some data part, with a life cycle, and maybe with some forms, and we can actually create relationships between data part of one process and values of those data variables in this one process might be the values of data variables of different processes, or actually references to forms of different processes, or to references to the tasks of different processes, or to the whole objects. So we do not only have references between objects themselves, but also we can have in a data variable, a value might be a task or a form of different process, as we will see in this running example. The second kind of relationship, as we taught, is on synchronizing of events. Like for example, here we could have an event in a workflow, in a life cycle, for example, to finish a task, and this finish of a task would finish a task in another process objects that are related through data variables. Like for example, I would store in some data variable of this process references to objects of different process. And then I will say, okay, please take all of these processes, go there, and if I finish this task, find here some tasks and finish them too. Okay, so we can have a event synchronization. And the third thing that we were talking about is using forms as subforms. For example, I could have here a form which is actually created from a part of my own data, and then some references to forms of different objects as subforms. And because I can have here one-to-n relationships, so for example, I can have 1, 2, 3 different forms in a table as subforms here. Yeah, so in this way I can actually establish rich relationships on data level, on event level, and on form level. Okay, now in order to understand better this concept, let us explain it in this small example. So now imagine that we have this process, and this is a process of an order. And in the life cycle, at the very beginning, an employee could request order approval from its boss. Yeah, and in that moment, when the employee assigns to him or herself the task request order approval, this task has a form with actually a couple of data attributes. One is order number, which is generated by the system. Then is a subject. For example, here the employee would say, I would like to buy 3 different cars, A6, Q7, and A3 from a supplier Audi. And here is also the place where I can actually add some file, PDF file, for example, a copy of that order to be printed or to be stored somewhere, okay, generated from those data. And I see that actually I have here these 4 data variables that are as data references on this form. So here on this form, data references is something, is a kind of appearance of data variable of an object of a process. So, and when the employee is clicking on the finish button, so then actually what I'm doing, I am moving to another state where boss gets the task to approve order, to decide whether it should be accepted, rejected, or maybe given back to the employee to rework, to fill some additional information or whatever. So I see here again with a little bit darker green the data variable that is editable on this form, and I see here with a bit lighter green these four variables are here just as editable, just as visible. So once the employee sends the order, so the boss sees this data and could here in this editable enumeration, in this data field, which is actually choosing one of three different values, accept, reject, and back. And once he choose here, for example, accept, he's accepting that order from his employee. So the department needs those 3 cars. So after he's accepting, after the boss or he or she is finishing that task, so we see that now we have another task where somebody, some employee, maybe at the administration, could send the order to supplier. So print that order and send it to supplier. And again, we see with a little bit lighter green those things that would be here not editable, and we see that it was accepted here. And because it was accepted, we use here what we already known from the previous lectures, so-called args with variable weight. So we set the data variable accept to 1, and therefore the token in this finish was moved here, and therefore the task send order to supplier is now enabled to be executed. And after the order is sent to the supplier, for example, we would have there an email service and sending that PDF file of the order generated from those data to the supplier. Maybe in that task, one could also fill the data. We didn't have the form here, but we can imagine that that would be an appropriate form for that task. And now, in order to speak about these rich relationships between objects of different processes, so we have this bulk approval. It means that we can at once maybe approve invoices that will be associated to that order. So, but now first we have to actually speak about a process of invoice and how this relationship will be established. So imagine that we have a different process. Here are the data attributes of that process, and here is the life cycle. And at the beginning, when somebody is creating a new invoice, new incoming invoice, then actually an invoice number is filled automatically. Then here maybe through the OCR or maybe manually, somebody need to write how much money should be paid, what is the price in that invoice, what is the amount of money, and then here is invoice file. For example, here is invoice file for that Audi A6, and here will be actually a special data variable where we can choose from IDs of all the possible orders that are available. For example, now we have chosen the same parent order that is displayed here. We see that this is a parent order which ends with 74. okay, we choose this one. So in that way that we here have chosen so-called case F here. So we need to somehow collect here all the possible IDs of orders, maybe also some details about those orders. So this is very simplified, because usually from the order ID you would never identify that this invoice should go to that order. So there should be maybe some details and maybe some form that is more rich than this illustrative form. But imagine once we choose an ID of an existing order, and what is very important, we should not take and collect here in an enumeration all the possible orders, but only those that have a token here. Only those orders that were already sent to our supplier. Yeah, because we don't want to actually associate an incoming invoice with an order that was, for example, rejected. So we only want to have orders that were accepted and already sent to the supplier. So then we know that supplier could actually send us the invoice. And once we are through these IDs, creating the relationship, now we need actually what we need to do, what we will see, we need to find this the case of a process, or the instance of a process, or the object of a process with this ID, and actually give it here as a children invoice. Yeah, so we have here now that this order has one children invoice, and this invoice is remembering that this is my parent. So we can make not only one side on one direction relationship, but also both direction relationship. So parent might remember what are his children, and children might remember who are the parents. Okay, and once we did this, so now we can actually create another invoice. So here is the first invoice for Audi A6, and now the situation, and another invoice, invoice 2 came. Here was invoice 1 for Audi A6, and now invoice 2 for Audi Q7 came, a little bit more expensive. And we are saying, okay, this is the same order. So we are taking, we choose this one and add it here to this list of children. And now we, for example, third order came, invoice 3. So at that moment, we actually did the same thing. We have chosen the same order, so added the invoice as a child here. So we see that now this order has 3 invoices as children, and all these 3 invoices have this order as a parent. Okay. And now, once we actually finished register invoice task in all of these 3 invoices, now actually approve invoice task is available in the life cycle, in the workflow process of all of these 3 invoices. But we, for example, do not want to accept those invoices separately, but we would like to make it at once. Like take this order and have this task bulk approval, and executing this task should actually take these 3 forms as subforms, that we are able to decide as a part of bulk approval task of the order all the incoming invoices that we registered and that are children of that order, that are associated with the order. So actually here, when we are assigning this bulk approval, we need to find all of the tasks that are from the process invoices and that are actually in this list of children. So go through all of the children and take a look whether approved invoice is available, so whether it might fire, it might be executed. So therefore, we don't want to list those that are not registered yet, but only those that are already registered. And from that are registered and are in this list, we took those that are ready to be approved. And we have here so-called task reference data variable, so-called task ref, and we add these three tasks, actually these three subforms here as three task references, a list of tasks. And we actually, on assign of this, we are also assigning these three. So we do not need only to have forms as subforms, but also synchronize events. So when I make decision here, I'm making decision here. When I make decision here, I'm making decision here. And the same holds for the third subform, okay? And once I here decided whether these invoices should be approved, for example, I would say, okay, so A6 is approved, Q7 is rejected, and this A3 we will postpone for later moment. So we will actually, here I can decide whether I should accept this invoice or reject that invoice or send it back, again using variable args or args with variable weights. So based on this decision, I'm actually sending tokens here or here or here for each of those three separate invoices that are actually appearing here as subtasks or subforms. And once I am finishing this event, I actually need to finish all these three events in these three different invoices. And based on the value here, accept later and reject, I would say tokens to this place, or back here to postpone it to the decision to a later stage, actually. And this is what we can do. And this is actually the illustration how we can make this data relationships on data variable level, how we can make relationship on event synchronization level, and how we can make a relationship on form subform. That means user interface level. So, and now we will go to Netgrif Application Builder, and we will take a closer look to both of these processes. First, we will take a closer look to order, and then we will take a closer look to invoice process. So we already prepared that process. We have seen them on the slides. So let us to simulate how it behaves. We will not go in detail into the data variables because we have seen them already in the presentation, but we will go to the actions to see the pieces of code where we actually synchronized those two kind of processes, actually invoices with the order. So just to or where we decided whether it should be accepted or rejected or sent back. So just to go through simulation mode, as we said at the very beginning, somebody can request for the order approval, finish it to a boss, and boss decides whether it should be approved or rejected. For example, saying that it is accepted and send the token here, then it will be sent to the supplier. And after that, one might have repeatedly to make bulk approval because we can have associated several invoices with that order. and the invoices can come actually in different time, and we would like maybe approve orders or invoices of becoming to an order once a week. Maybe we made 50, 70 invoices for one order. Nobody knows, so therefore it should be done repeatedly. And all the time we can see here, read the order detail. It is always good to have a task like this, where we always can see what is the state of the workflow process. Okay, and then we have this second process, which is process of invoice. And again, when we go through a simulation mode, so first somebody is registering the invoice, establishing that connection, so choosing one of the orders that are already sent to the customer as a parent order, and after the finish, okay, invoice is prepared to be approved, and it might be approved either as a single invoice, or it might be approved in this multi-task bulk approval as a part of the processing of the order, of the parent order of that invoice. And based on the fact that what is actually decided, for example, if it's sent to later, so then what we want, that it goes back and then it's again in that state, or it might happen that it is, for example, accepted in order to make the distinguish, in order to distinguish between accepting in order and accepting in of the invoice. So here we use OK and KO, and later, so we are saying, okay, this invoice is quite okay, might be paid. And remember, this finish that I just made might be done separately when we are working and processing this invoice, or maybe done here after we finish this bulk approval, so that will synchronize this invoice approval when this invoice is a children invoice of that order. And here we have just simple task just to see whether invoice was accepted and just to see whether it was rejected. And here again we can read the invoice detail. And if we go here, when we start here, so in the request order approval, we have only order ID, subject, and supplier. In approve order, we have order ID, subject, and supplier, and then the decision. And we see that these three are visible. This should also be visible. So we are making some small changes. And this is actually editable, the only editable thing. After it's approved, so we see that send order has no, okay, it also has some very simple form. Again, just order ID, subject, and supplier. And here in this bulk approval, we have order ID, subject, supplier. And here we have just to indicate, this is just the help, this is just some kind of help variable, just to indicate that that some new invoice was added. Actually, in order here we will see the last invoice that were added. Okay. Here is just some divider, and here is actually a task ref. This is actually a task ref. So here will be a list of IDs of tasks of invoices that should be approved. Okay. And if we go actually here in read order detail, here are just the details of the order. And if we go here in register invoice, we have invoice ID, amount, order, file, and here we will have an enumeration where we will actually choose from all available orders which order should be a parent order to this invoice. And this is actually a required variable, so we cannot register invoice without associating that invoice with an order that was already sent to a customer. That is our policy. After it's registered, then here is like just invoice ID, parent order ID, amount, and decision, whether it should be accepted, rejected, or postponed to the later stage. So we use OK, KO, and later variables for that associated to these arcs. And now here is just a simple message that this invoice was accepted and this invoice was rejected. Here we could actually continue the process or processing of the invoices, maybe for accepted orders, if we want to pay them to the supplier. For rejected, we want to send him a message that we don't need that goods, and we would like to ship the goods back to him within, I don't know, a period of 2 weeks from getting them. So okay, we don't need them. And in read invoice details, we just have all the data variables of the invoice. Okay, and now the most important part, how we establish those relationships. So we will now go through all of the actions, and we see what piece of code did we write in order to establish those relationships. So we will start with the order, and if we go to action edit view, okay, so we can see that first of all, when we created a new order, so we have in post phase of this constructor event where the order instance of the order process was created. So we have actually this small piece of code. Here, as we know from the previous examples, these are just the mappings between IDs of data variables and parameters in this small action. So one-to-one mappings with the same names. And here in this line of code, we are actually saying that process ID invoice value of that variable will store the whole ID of the process. It means a workspace plus invoice. Remember last time when we were having that example with insurance, there we use actually a more complicated method to getting that workspace, because we wanted to approach a new instance of insurance also from anonymous view. So also not registered users that were not logged in the system, because imagine if I will then now work with this system, I can be logged in or I can work in anonymous mode. And if we are working with anonymous mode, it has a different workspace as our workspace. So our workspace here, for example, our workspace here, is start Petriflow. But if we are opening an instance from a different view, like from anonymous view, then we are in a different workspace. Or therefore, we actually didn't know in which workspace we are, and therefore we wanted just that the processes of insurance and insured person are in the same workspace. Yeah, therefore when we wanted to work with insured person, we identified the workspace of insurance and took that prefix, the same workspace, also for insured person. Now we have much better situation because we will allow to register or to ask for approval only orders that are created by employees, and employees are logged user into the system. They are not anonymous. Yeah. So actually, we didn't create the roles for these two simple processes, for these illustrative processes. We could. We have seen how to create the roles in previous lectures, but for sake of simplicity, now we are only focusing on the workflow and the establishing of the connection. So here with this line, we are saying, okay, in the same workspace where is invoice should also be in the same workspace where is order should also be invoice. So we are taking our workspace where we are just now, and for that we use the keyword workspace. This is actually a constant, and adding string invoice to that. In that moment, if I'm doing that, I will get the start Petriflow / invoice, and this will be actually the full path, the full name, the full ID of my process. So in this variable, actually process ID of the process invoice, we will now have this string to make sure that we are working in that the order actually knows the ID of the invoice process in the same workspace. Okay, now what are we doing with this line? With this line, we are like saying, okay, the name of the data variable is telling us, we are saying, okay, cases, children invoice cases, these are actually is a case reference variable where we store our children invoices. So therefore we say that allowed nets, it means allowed processes, are process ID invoice, which is actually workflow plus invoice, that is this, and its value. So it's actually this string. So we are saying only instances of the process invoice, which is in the same workspace as this order, only those could be in the list of cases that are children cases of this order, invoice children cases. This is what we are doing with this line 5. And what are we doing with line 6? We are saying actually we have a variable order ID where we copy string ID of the use case. This is in order to display ID of the order. And to display it, we need to have a text variable for that, where we copy that, that string ID. So this is what we do on create event of an order. Okay, then we only have, we actually do not have, if we go through data, we see we do not have any, action on set or get data except one. I have this data variable which is called new invoice ID, and it is a help data variable that will make the communication between invoices and the orders easier. And actually what I will do, if I am in the invoice and if I am choosing one of the orders to be my parent, in that moment when I will finish this registration, I will take the ID of the invoice and sending this ID as a data, setting this variable, saying, okay, I'm a new child of this order. And this will trigger a set event of this variable in that order that has now a new child. And here I will just do this. I will have just this mapping between IDs and parameters, and I just have two lines. And here I'm actually saying if new value of this new invoice ID, if this value isn't in children invoice cases yet, then please take the old children invoice cases, a list of the children's IDs, and add this new invoice as a new child. That's actually all I do. Okay? So I'm using it actually as a receiver. Okay, you have a new child. Just sending that ID. And then I am doing like this, changing the list of my children, adding this new child to my list of children. And I only have two. If I go here, actually, I have no events for request order approval. I have no events for send order to supplier and no events for read order detail. I only have events to approve order, and approve order events have nothing to do with the communication between processes. This is actually just that whenever I am choosing accept, then I am setting accept variable to 1 and reject and back to 0. When I'm choosing reject in enumeration in this form, in this enumeration, so then I'm setting reject to 1 and accept and back for 0. And when I am choosing back from this enumeration, I am actually changing the back value to 1 and having and setting accept and reject to 0. So what I am actually doing, it means here, if I am here choosing accept or reject or back, based on that, I am setting actually accept, back, or reject to 1 or 0s. Yeah, in that way, I'm then sending token either back or accepting or rejecting. Okay, so this is a standard method how to make decision. We already have this in previous examples, so this is nothing new. And the only task where I am establishing this relationship is bulk approval. And in bulk approval, remember, I have to do two things. When I am assigning bulk approval, I need to find all the invoices that are my children and have task invoice approval, which has ID T2. Okay, when I'm going here on assign, this is actually this. Here again, a mapping. Here again, a mapping of IDs to parameters. And I have actually two things. I'm changing these invoice approvals, which is a task ref. In that way, I'm calling find task method, and I'm saying, please find all the tasks that the case ID of those tasks is in children invoice cases value, so it is my children, and at the same time, the transition ID of that task equals to T2, so equals to this one, equals to invoice approval. And I'm collecting these tasks. I'm collecting actually this task. So I write here collect, and I'm collecting not the tasks themselves, but string IDs of those tasks. Okay? And these string IDs, I am giving into the value of this task ref, because task ref is just, as a data variable, is just a list of IDs of tasks. So in that way, I'm saying, okay, I'm finding all of the tasks that are my children, and I'm finding T2 tasks of those invoices. Okay? In that way, I actually initialized which subtasks should I have in this task. But it is not enough. What I also need to do, when I am actually in the simulation mode, and when I'm actually here accepting, and when I am here making this assign, I also want that for all of these tasks that are found, I also want that this will be assigned, that actually this will be assigned. So I want to synchronize those events. So therefore, when I'm going back to that action, here on bulk approval on pre-assign, not only that I found those tasks, but I also say, okay, take each of these IDs, and replace, or for this ID in this task list, execute this piece of code. And what is this piece of code saying? It is actually saying here in some help variable invoice to approve, store the result of this method find task, and which times should I find, that it ID equals this ID in that list. So I'm taking ID after ID, finding the task for that ID with this line, and storing that task in this invoice to approve, and then I am calling assign task method for this task. So in that way, I'm actually going in that bulk up. When I'm assigning bulk approval in order, I'm going through I am first finding all of my children, because they could change, because some of them could be in previous attempt of bulk approval be approved, some of them could be postponed later, some of them could be rejected. So I need to actually find all of tasks here. Yeah, because not all the invoices that belong to me as a children need to be approved. Only those that actually have this invoice approval task existing, enabled to be executed. And in that moment, I'm also assigning this. So by assign, find all the children and assign this task also in all those children. And a very similar thing I will do in finish of this bulk approval. And it is actually this. Here we have a mapping of data variable IDs to parameters. And we have the same thing that we had in assign, with just very small difference, because we have to clear the list of tasks by finish that should be approved, because they are actually finished. So because we need to clear here with this line of code that task ref, we are first copying the value of the task ref into some help variable list of task IDs. Then we are clearing that list of tasks, and for all of the tasks that were into that list, for each of these tasks, we are actually just finding that task, storing it in this help variable, and finishing that task. In that way, when we are finishing bulk approval, we are actually finishing all of the tasks that are in that bulk approval, or all of the invoice tasks, invoice approval. So like we are doing something like this. And based on the values of that we choose, whether it should be accepted, rejected, or postponed to later, we are actually moving tokens either here or here or here. In this illustrative example, we move the token in this place, and then we could see that invoice was accepted. So these are actually all of the actions in this process order, and in process invoice, there are only two actions. The first one is in process create event. If we are creating a new invoice, we are actually just saying we have an invoice ID variable that we want to display, and we are copying to that variable string ID of this invoice. That is nothing crazy. And another actions, or two actions that we have, if we are registering the invoice, we are actually having the mapping of data variable to parameters, and then we are finding all cases that process identifier of those cases equals order, and P5 is marked by a token. We find all of those cases, and we are collecting string order plus string of that order. And after we find those cases, we are taking parent order enumeration, and we are setting the option of that enumeration to all of these, to actually this list of strings, beginning order, double point, and string ID of the order. So what we are actually doing, we are actually, because which orders do we want to give as a possibility to be parent orders of an invoice? Now, only those that were already sent to supplier. So only those they have a token here in send it. And send it, if we show IDs, is P5. Therefore, we had here, okay, find those that are from the process order and have a token in P5. Okay? And this is what we did. Yeah, and in finish, we actually, in finish of register invoice, we actually want just one thing. Again, we have this mapping. We are finding a case for this chosen value from orders that could be my parent. I choose one. I am finding that case on finish of registering, and I am setting data of what? Of this variable new invoice ID. of this one. And remember, this one, what made this one? This had a set action where I told that, okay, when this ID is really new, as is not my child, add this ID to my children invoices. Okay, therefore, when I'm finishing, I'm just sending my ID and saying the order, please do with this ID what do you want, and instead of this new invoice ID of order, there is really written, okay, you get this ID, and if this is not your child yet, so add this to your children. So, and the last thing, the last action then I have is in invoice approval. In invoice approval, in finish, I only have actually a copy of the decision, standard decision with variable args. If one choose OK or KO or later, depending on what was chosen, the variable OK, KO, and later are set either to 0 or to 1. Yeah. So if I choose OK, then OK value should be 1. If I choose KO, KO should be 1. And if I choose later in this enumeration, later should be 1. And remember, in this enumeration decision, IDs are OK, KO, and later, but I'm displaying strings accept, reject, and later for the user, but keys were OK, KO, and later. In this way, I'm actually doing here this decision, deciding whether I should move token here, or give it back based on this decision, based on whether I choose OK, KO, or later. And that's all. That's all. In that way, we created these two processes. And what we have now, we already have this invoice and order uploaded to ETAS Netgrif Cloud. And now we can simulate the employee and the boss and all the roles in these processes using one account. So now we are actually creating an order, and now we are saying, okay, subject of this order after assigning will be A6, Q7, and A3 from Audi, and we are finishing. Now I'm playing my boss. I'm saying, okay, I see 3 cars, and decision is accept. Then I can send it to a supplier. And when I'm sending to a supplier here, I have this bulk approval. Yeah. Now I will create 3 different cases of order, of invoice. I'm saying, okay, this is the first invoice. Saying, for example, 50,000 for Audi A3, and saying here that this order will be my parent. I see all of the orders that I can attach as parents. I have created just one, so I'm doing this. Now I am creating another invoice. I'm saying, okay, this is 75,000, and this is Audi A6. And I'm saying, okay, it is the same order. And now I'm creating the third one, the third invoice that is incoming. And I'm saying, okay, it is 100,000, and this is for Q7. And I'm saying, okay, the same order. And when I did this, I can go to the order and say, okay, I will do the bulk approval. And I see no children invoices yet, but when I'm assigning, I see, okay, it found 3 invoices that are my children and have this task, invoice approval, available. Sorry. So now I'm saying, for example, okay, I will accept this Audi A3. I will postpone this. It should be 75, so I'm changing that, maybe this Audi A6, and I am rejecting that Q7 because it's too expensive. We don't need that car. I'm giving that back, sending back to the dealership. And now, when I did this, when I see all of this, so I see that really this is accepted. This is postponed to later, and this is rejected. So actually, here in this bulk approval, these 3 lines are actually these 3 different tasks. Yeah, and I see that these tasks are already assigned, so I synchronize assign. And when I am now finishing that bulk approval, so I'm saying, okay, I will do this, I'm finishing. Then if I go, now if I'm going to these instances, I see, okay, this Audi A3 was accepted. This another one, was postponed to later, and therefore, because it was postponed to later, it was actually here. So invoice approval is again available. I have to design once more, and this one was rejected. And if I go to that order and press bulk approval second time, now I only have this car that I sent postponed the decision. And when I'm saying, okay, I'm also accepting this A6, and I am finishing, now I see that also this A6 is invoice accepted. Okay, so therefore, what we did is really working, and in this way, we actually had 3 invoices that we associated to one order, and we could see that we can actually decide in bulk approval about all the invoices that belong to me, and I didn't do the final decision yet. So in this way, you can maybe understand how the communication between processes works. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and we will add those examples. You can try yourself and play with this simple example and enjoy the interprocess communication in Petriflow language and workflow low-code platform. So have a nice day. See you in the next lecture.